see.
You can see me well. Excellent. So first and foremost, I want to thank each and every person that has taken time out to tune in today. This will be a treat. I believe it's a conversation that should be happening all over the world, and you're going to be hearing from two people that hearts are in the right place and who want to do and make this world a better place. Hopefully, we'll have our other guests coming on, but Lisa here will more than suffice. So we're going to still get perspective. It's always good to have a diverse perspective. So hopefully
Mhm.
Michael will still get on. Everlois will still get on. You guys can dial in as well. And of course, National Block Club University thanks all of our $1 a month donors, $12 donors, our loaners, our business sponsors. We couldn't do this without you. So thank you. And please tell others and let's keep that going. So without further ado, I'm about to bring up to you someone who I've known for over 15 years. It's been seamless. I met her when I was downtown in the Sears Tower. You guys may know it
Mhm.
now as Willis. So uh, her spirit has been pure across the board. And when you meet people who have this type of heart, you're blessed to be in their orbit. And so I want to bring to you guys Lisa Kenner. She has been in many hats, a principal of a school as well. Her and my wife rock and roll well together. So Lisa, thank you for coming on.
Bless you. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Now, Lisa, from your perspective, how did we meet? Or what
Right.
was
Well,
your
I,
take
I
when
have
we
the
met?
same memory. We met in the Tower of Power. I remember it. We were, I want to say it was 2004,
Okay.
and I was a part. I had just been brought on board to help open a new school, to plan a new school in North Lawndale. And of course, to create a new school, one doesn't plop down a school. The most important and fundamental task is to seek the hearts and minds of human beings in the community to ask, what is it that we should build? What are the hopes and dreams that families and community members have for a new school?
Right.
What are the mistakes that we need to learn from? What are the priorities? And so I had a blessed year-long journey in planning the school, which would one day become Legacy Charter School in North Lawndale. At that time, it didn't have a name or a building, but had the potential and possibility. And so as I was connecting across North Lawndale, I was told by many, many people that I need to meet Cyron Smith. And I remember we met in the lobby of the Tower of Power, and the rest is history.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, just so our people have a little background, though, where did you grow up? Where did you come from? Are you the only child? Of course,
Yeah,
I seen your mother's beautiful
yeah.
picture, and I think I would have been blessed to meet her because you're the offspring to her.
Bless you. No, I love context too. I'm the youngest of 7 children. I was born actually in California in 1969. I just turned 51 years old. And I was raised by my mother and father. My mother was a nurse and my father was a college professor. And so being the child of a professor is a little bit like growing up in the military, because wherever your parent finds work or has work is where you live. So we moved around a bunch growing up. And so I spent most of my time in Baltimore growing up. I was born in California, raised in Baltimore, Maryland.
Wow.
And I came to Chicago when had just turned 17 to go to school. And I've been here ever since. I came here to study music back in 1986.
Mm.
And through that journey of being a music major, as God works, I was connected with a Chicago public school principal. In 1987, she came and spoke at the university, and I remember being there listening to her, and she said, if you want to change the world, get in a classroom. I'll never forget her big, beautiful hat and the flowers on her hat and that message. And I came up to her after her presentation, and I said, I'd love to work with you. I'd love to volunteer. May I join your school? And it changed my life. Little did I know what that night would do. But then I met that woman, that extraordinary educational leader, is Dr. Grace Dawson.
Mm,
And she at that time was the principal of Beethoven School on 47th and State.
mm.
And that was my first segue into Chicago Public Schools. And my first experience really starting to understand the beginning of my journey of learning about Chicago. I did not grow up in Chicago. I came here late as a teenager. And
Right.
so that was the beginning of an incredible journey.
Now I'm sure that was an eye opener all by itself, because Chicago is unique in this nation. I would say. Did you feel as a
Yes.
teenager though? Did you feel the racial segregation in the city?
You know, I did, but I didn't understand it so much. Everything was really new to me. I was living in an apartment in Rogers Park. I was going to classes in Evanston. I had gone to Northwestern in my undergrad. And so I would see riding the subway train, or riding the L, I would see, you know, Rogers Park, move to Howard, move to Evanston. So I would notice these things. And then a year later, when I started volunteering at the Beethoven School with Dr. Dawson, I would take the red line from Morse. I lived right off the Morse stop. My living room, I could wave to my roommate off the train. You know, it was our apartment faced the train tracks.
That close,
Um,
right?
oh yeah. And I remember every morning taking the train from Morse to 47th Street and then walking east to Beethoven. And I would see, as the train moved, the different neighborhoods of Chicago. And I would always hear that Chicago was a city of neighborhoods. And I didn't understand what that meant. And I always heard that if you go east, that's where the lake is. And if you get lost, ask where the lake is. So those are the two facts I was told a lot. And I didn't understand them. But I got the lake more quickly than I understood the city of neighborhoods. I've grown to understand that it is really, I would argue, sugar-coated segregation. We are a segregated city, but is named as a city of neighborhoods.
Right.
But so my journey of going into Robert Taylor Homes and being in Beethoven School as a very young person, I was a teenager. I was only a few years older than the young people I was, you know, tutoring, and there was such mutual learning and teaching happening. And I think that continues to inform my assumptions about learning and teaching, and that learning happens in the context of a caring, respectful relationship. And certainly the eighth graders at Beethoven were some of my most formative teachers as when I was a teenager myself.
Well, you know, we have in the lineup here, of course, the conversation is about race, so we want to talk about that, but I want to make sure that we speak on from a male perspective, and
Mm-hmm.
you as a female looking at our black male perspective, also our black women
Mm-hmm.
perspective, and then children. I think each one of them deserves, perspective from us. And then we look at the institutions that we're dealing with here in the city, and we'll stay open
Mm-hmm.
for people to jump in if they actually chime in. So let's start with George Floyd and what's happening now. From your estimation, um, was this waiting to happen? At some point, this was going to come to a head, the status of America?
I do think so. I remember January 1st, 2020. And I remember so many people saying this was the year of vision. And that was across social media and memes and everything else. And what I don't know, I certainly wasn't, I didn't predict that which we would collectively see more clearly. When I think about 2020, and certainly George Floyd's murder, sanctioned murder in front of the world, um, I think that in Chicago and in the United States of America, There's been a big unveiling. There's been a big reveal to many people, that which is chronic, urgent, and historically prevalent for decades and generations. And I think that multiple pandemics have been brought to a center focus.
Right.
I don't assume that the same meaning is being made by different individuals that are beholding these different layers.
Right.
But I think of 2020 as a big reveal, especially in certain sectors and communities, especially, I'm going to overgeneralize, for many white people. And I am a white woman. As a woman, that as well.
Now, here's what I think, because you being a teacher or a principal, you had a chance to pour into young people who you knew they were coming from backgrounds and the social side that was challenging. Without telling, naming anyone, what challenges did you see from the students coming to school that you couldn't even get to the teaching part because of other barriers there?
Right. Well, I think, I assume, just to sort of, one, every human being has purpose. Every human being is for a reason. When a flower doesn't grow in a plant bulb, we look at the environment. We ask, is so in the world of horticulture versus humanity? I think there are a lot of parallels. And last but not least, I think we're all learning constantly. Human beings are full life experiences to any situation. To learn anew, to learn something new, to complicate our assumptions, to complicate our narratives. This is a long intro to what you just asked. I promise I'm going to answer your question more directly. But I think that when I look at my journey as a human being and as an educator and a white woman in Chicago, what prepared me for example, the principalship that I most recently had in North Lawndale at Legacy, starting in 2005, through when I guess I was there till, I should know, this 3 years ago. So many years, 12, 13 years.
Wow.
I brought different life experiences from different places where I had lived in Chicago and I had taught in Chicago, that created the filter through which I made sense of what I was seeing, hearing, and experiencing. So for example, when I taught in the Audi home for many years, that was one of my first teaching positions in the early 90s. What I learned there was absolutely every human being has complex life experiences they're bringing to the table,
Right.
that one cannot teach without establishing a trusting relationship, that curriculum must be relevant, otherwise you're wasting a human being's time.
Yeah.
And that young people and all human beings need voice and choice. And human beings aren't empty vessels to be filled with some academic knowledge.
Right.
Human beings are alive for a reason, and they need an opportunity to discover their own gifts and build upon them. And sometimes that also means, often that means, healing, creating a space, co-creating a space where a human being can let down the appropriate masks and guards and shields that a human being must carry through high crisis situations.
Exactly.
So in terms of when we built Legacy, we continue to learn so many things. First of all, again, relationships. The key relationship is between the child, the educator, and the family. And the family is the expert on a child. And the educator, the goal is for us to come together and build a relationship so that we are able to trust each other. You know, a family is entrusting their most valuable treasure in the world to a school, and that's their baby. And
No doubt. That's
In
right.
my whole, and I say my baby, and a baby could be 15 years old, but their child,
Yeah.
and I've never in my life met a parent who doesn't want better for their child,
Right.
better than what they had. In my life,
Right.
I've never met a parent anywhere. Um,
Yeah.
so it's about figuring out, how do we work together to make sure the child does what human beings do, which is learn and grow. And
Right.
sometimes we have to get out of a child's way
Yep.
to help them do it.
Yep.
Learn some of the behaviors they've learned to keep themselves safe or protected, either in another school, in another classroom, or
Right.
in a scary situation.
Right.
Um, so
Now, and what I
yeah,
always
those are
say,
some of the things.
people in general, we carry luggage with us constantly. And if you're fortunate enough, you had the right coaches who can help you know how to put that luggage into compartments and only tap into it when it benefits you, versus carrying that luggage
Right,
around and you don't need that stuff that's in that. Just imagine going out of town and you didn't bring your toothbrush. So you need that luggage,
right,
but you want to make sure that
yeah,
it's in the right compartments for easy access. So
yeah.
but-
I,
so
I mean, yeah.
so I want to
I
make sure. So do you, based on your experience and what you've seen here, do you think there's a race problem in Chicago? And if it is, what would you say are the reasons for it? If you could just give us three. Uh, is it a
Sure.
race problem, and what are the top three
Yes.
reasons for it?
I would say the answer is yes. There is a race problem in Chicago, and I would argue beyond Chicago. But I know Chicago better than other places because this is where I've been for a few decades.
Right.
Um, I think there are multiple causes, and I in no way pretend to be an expert. I am a learner, but I will share a few things that I continue to learn.
Hmm.
Um, and they're sort of on all layers. Okay, so number one, um, I think there's a premise. You've probably heard of this, but have you heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs by any chance?
Go by it all
Maslow
the time. So, yeah.
okay. So to me, in 2020, every day I think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And for those that might not be familiar with it, definitely Google it, find it. But it's essentially the premise that every human being has layers of fundamental needs, basic needs that have to be met, and then psychological needs that
Yep.
need to be met, and then specific opportunities for full self-fulfillment.
Yep.
Fulfillment.
Yep.
And I think, and so some of those basic needs are things such as, food, shelter, air,
Yep.
clothing.
Yep.
Then on the next layer, employment.
Yep.
Um, they're just really key
Yep.
resources. I'm looking, I won't,
But
we
that
can
the
look them up,
sense of
but
belonging, I think, is at the fourth level. To belong
belonging,
to
sense of
something. Yeah.
belonging,
Hmm.
absolutely. And so I think that sometimes, yeah, sense of belonging, friendship, intimacy,
Right.
respect, recognition, status, freedom is named. So when I think about what are key things that every human being needs to do what human beings do, which is to grow and develop and change, we
Hmm.
change not because we're bad. We
Hmm.
change not because we're broken. We change because we are verbs. That
Hmm.
is our destiny. That's what we're supposed to do.
Right.
So in order to set a human being up to do what they need to do, basic needs must be met.
Hmm.
And so when one looks at an individual, a family, a community, and beyond, I think one of the key questions are, what are the access to having basic needs met? What are the resources? What is the infrastructure that is available? So sort of circle back for a second.
Hmm.
I think one of the causes of racism and the racial conflict in the city is our prevailing dominant narratives, prevailing stories. As human beings, we're meaning makers, and we make meaning based on stories that have been passed on to us
Hmm.
from media, from the news, from Hollywood, from books, from music, what have you. And these stories we tell ourselves. The most important story I would also offer is the story we tell ourselves. how
Right.
we are making meaning of experiences we have,
Yep.
you know? And so there are so many dominant narratives. So for example, Black men, there are so many poisonous, fictional, toxic narratives about Black men. Black men as fathers, Black men as leaders, Black men as educators, Black men as
Authors.
central anchor, as authors. And I mean, it is, I remember at Legacy, for example, I think I connected this human being with you, but a pastor in Tennessee was looking at the role of Black men and families. And long story short, he reached out and asked if we would want to participate. And I said, please, sir, please come to Legacy and see dismissal. Because every day that I am standing outside, which I did just about every day for dismissal Legacy, the dominant tide of humanity, hundreds of people that were picking up children were what? Men,
Yep.
fathers, grandfathers,
Yep.
big brothers, uncles, you know, again, just complete fiction. And I remember he said, well, how do you get all these fathers here? I said, how do you, I didn't understand the premise of the question. I said, well, we are a family school, and you make sure that everyone knows they are wanted and needed, that this is a team, you know.
Right.
Anyhow, so I think about dominant narratives about, for example, Black men as fathers is one that comes to mind. Another one that comes to mind that is, I don't know, I haven't heard it articulated explicitly, but this idea that that being poor is a character flaw. And I've never heard someone say those words, and it feels awkward coming out of my mouth, but I want to be candid here. That there's this sense, I think, that individuals that have wealth somehow have earned that.
Exactly.
Somehow they're better. Somehow they've done something that makes them worthy of that. And individuals that do not have wealth, there's something they did wrong. There's some way they're lacking, you know, and that's beyond diabolical. That is poison in our soil. Yeah. And so when, you know, the more that we as human beings can learn about why we as society in Chicago, for example, are where we are in 2020, when we understand, and I don't pretend to completely understand, but I can tell you I'm committed to continuing to learn.
Right.
I'm trying to learn about the consequences of redlining in terms of the access to quality healthcare, housing, all of the institutional policy-driven ways in which, for example, African-American families have been completely, I don't want to say, have been explicitly cut out of different transference of wealth, access to different opportunities over the generations. Not to say that they're not individuals that have, you know, have found a way through, not in any way to say that, but just the premise of American history and government and policy is rarely explored enough, I think, especially, and I'm going to say as a white chick, one can have a completely different life experience than somebody 2 miles away. You know, I live in Humboldt Park, and I love it. I've been here, I don't know how long have I been here? I guess 13 years, 14 years or something. But if I just go a few miles east, so I live west of Kimball, just near Division, okay? If I drive east on Division and even just go to Division and Damon, let alone go to Division and State, I'm in a whole different world of Chicago. Yep. And one of the things that I like to do whenever I go in different parts of the city, and I've been blessed because I've taught in different parts of the city, west side, south side, north side. I've lived in different parts of the city, north side, west side, south side. Those experiences are more important than any book I've read, frankly, or sort of any intellectual thesis, it's having experience, it's shared experience together.
Yep.
But if I can imagine, again, as a white person, if I were living in I don't even know what it's called, like near Division and State, for example. If I was living there, I don't know what the neighborhood's called. If I was living there, and if I was going to school near there, and if I had a job, even as a teenager, if I worked at like the subway on Division,
Right.
I could pretty much have my life experience without intimate, and when I say intimate engagement, real life experiences with Black folks, people of color, or maybe the only Black folks I would see would be in certain jobs in my neighborhood where I live,
Right.
So again, I think there's all these consequences of these siloed communities laid on top of institutional access and historic redlining. And I think it creates a perfect storm, and it's not new. I recognize this isn't new.
Right. Now,
Yeah.
but do you think, Lisa, because I one of the things that I love to look at, because even here I'm in Georgia now, so white flight back in the 1960s, it helped ensure, if you will, that the movement of this Black population was going to be kind of thwarted. In Gary, Indiana, for instance, when white flight took place in Gary, they literally, the jobs went, the companies went right with the white people. So it left Gary, Indiana just totally a ghost town with no tax base. And they right outside of Gary, in Portage, Hammond, Lake Station, all of that. And what's your thoughts on the housing in the 1960s? The white flight in Chicago did the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it becomes sort of going back to the dominant narrative. It just seeds this fiction because, like you said, when resources or jobs move with the privilege of white folks, then the individuals, again, do not have access. The individuals that remain, for example, in Gary, I think about when I drive through Gary, and I remember when you were there, and I remember calling you when you're there. On some levels, Gary, there are parts of Gary that feel abandoned in ways,
Yeah,
but at the
yeah,
same time, yeah,
big
and
time.
but at the same time, yeah, and in the world of asset-based thinking, there are extraordinary human beings and families that are there, and it's a mistake. Gary better than me, but I think I know that it's a mistake to assume
Yeah.
because economic engines have moved out
Right.
of Gary, for example, that the humanity, the individuals of Gary are broken. There's nothing wrong with the people, is what I'm trying to say. There is not a flaw or brokenness in the individuals. Individuals have the opportunity to experience whatever the environment and individuals around. But I think, I don't know, I guess part of your questions about, I'm sorry, about employment. I want to circle back so I don't
No,
go
no,
off.
no. White flight. I was saying
White
white
flight,
flight
yeah.
really,
Oh, yeah.
like, it really did damage in America.
Yeah. Yeah. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, because then people can say, look, look what they're doing. Look at these men on the corner. I remember, and the thing is about K-Town, which is a very close to my heart. That's where, we were for many years at Legacy. And I remember what I would do when an individual was interested in learning more about North Lawndale. You have to be careful in this, because you have to be careful, I find, you don't unintentionally feed deficit mindset. You have to be careful that you're not unintentionally feeding the dominant narrative.
Dominant. I'm making a note of that.
Yeah, no, I'm on fire about the dominant narrative, because I keep learning the power of it, because that's part of what I have to keep unlearning. I feel like I feel that I have exercised certain negative assumptions that I have grown up in as a white woman in this country. I've been seeping in these messages. And every once in a while, I still walk through cobwebs, and I'll say, wow, wait, hold on. I gotta, we have to constantly be aware of the meaning that we're making and question it, that we're not just defaulting to the dominant narrative that we all are soaking
That's
in.
easy, right? That's easy, and
Yeah,
actually pretty lazy too. It's lazy and easy.
it
So yeah,
is, but it's so enforced in so many places, you know.
yeah,
But I think, I mean, just as an example, just to go to North Lawndale for a moment. So, I'll finish my anecdote. I would say, so if you were raising your children here in North Lawndale, I said, where would you send your babies to go? Where would you send your babies for their daycare? Where would you have them be when you were at work? And there are plenty of daycare there. But guess what? A lot of the daycare, you have to know somebody. There are a lot of home-based daycare. So they
right,
might not be known. You know, there's Les Bench on 16th. There's
right,
Carol Robinson is fantastic. You know, so there are for sure, you know, sort of more marquee
right.
daycare. But just sort of understanding again, there's so much more than meets the eye. You might
Exactly.
not see a daycare, but trust and believe, Miss Sharice is running a beautiful daycare. It just doesn't have the signage, and you don't know about it unless you know.
You're
Or I would
connected,
say,
right?
where would you send your 16-year-old to get a part-time job and drive around? I remember once just driving around. Well, I said, well, where would you have your teenager get a job? I said, well, where would you have a job? You know, so, but again, you have to be careful with these drive-through analyses that it doesn't unintentionally see,
Right,
because then you have to ask why. Why do you think there's not a grocery store here?
right.
Why is it such a big deal when the Green Tomato Cafe opened on Ogden, Lawndale Christian opened that? Why does that, you know, anyhow, so,
Mm.
um,
Now, but it's
but
something that you say that because as a white woman, you're operating with a little, I call it BOD, benefit of doubt, right? You got the benefit of
mm,
doubt, right?
mm,
So you got bandwidth to be wrong, if you will. Now, one of
right,
the challenges that I love to do is I love to put pressure internally and say to the Black community, we have a $3 trillion economy, and when you look inside Black neighborhoods, businesses are owned by people who don't care about the little Johnny who is struggling, don't care about little Johnny's father that's locked up, and when he get out next month won't have a job. And so we're constantly feeding resources to business leaders, businesses that can care less, and we can easily own them businesses ourselves, easily. But this is the damage, psychological damage that's been done. And so it's almost like unless a white person come and open it, unless Arab come and open it, unless an Asian come and open it, we can't do it. And that's I believe part of what slavery has done. The trauma of what the ancestors went through, our ancestors went through, has done to us. What do you think about that?
just yesterday, Sai, I promise you, what you just named came up yesterday in Circle. So one of the things that I'm a part of, I work for Contextos now, and it's a nonprofit that does author circles around the city. And what we create author circles to create a space of healing for a human being to reconcile their own story and to come to terms with their own truth, not just the story that people have been telling them, or the story that we default and tell ourselves our own stories.
Right.
Anyhow, so yesterday in Author Circle, literally, one of the stories that an author shared, and this is a young man in his mid-20s, he had recently started a landscaping business. I'm
Mm.
not oversharing from Circle, I promise. I'm only sharing that which is not,
Right.
not Vegas. Um, but one of the things he said, he made a comment about, and he's a young Black man. He made a comment disparaging Black customers. He said, I think his exact words were, what were his exact words? He expect high quality, very, very, compelling phrase. And I remember sitting there, um, you know, and my colleague, and so I named that because there's he had had. and why he was saying why white customers were easier to deal with, or why Latino customers were easier to deal with, or and how and he was talking about customers going for Latino landscapers instead of him, and he was unpacking all these different assumptions just to what you're talking about, and it was so powerful because Johnny really stayed in that theme for a smooth. We really stayed there for a
Yeah.
while,
Yeah.
examining that assumption, and Johnny kept really pushing on that assumption, and how much. And he said, and for example, he said, in life, we can do something well and be the anomaly, but then when we drop the ball, we're evidence that we're all broken. He says that's a lie.
Right.
And because you might have had a customer, and sure, he said I've had some shady aliens or people that are frustrating. He said, but that doesn't mean that that is the truth, that that is the axiom,
Right.
that is the rule. But that's part of the dominant narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it protects, because when you think about it, how much would you say is a worry for white America about reparations? Like, you don't want to see the Black community get too bold or confident, because then they may start asking for repairs, economic repairs. What's your thoughts on that?
Right. I truly think I know Facebook is not the place of social change, but not that long ago, a month or so, I said, where is our reparations council? Like, we need, I think I remember first hearing about reparations not that long ago, like maybe, I guess I heard about it every once in a while in the 90s. I was teaching in a really strong HBCU driven alternative school in Chicago. And I really, again, as a white woman, was learning so much from my colleagues and partners about millions of things. So that's the first time I really ever heard of reparations. And now, and I've heard about it since and read about it. And certainly I think of the piece in Atlantic a few years ago. I'm like, wow, all right, I'm seeing the arguments becoming, what is even more compelling for that, which should be really obvious, I think. But I really think now in 2020, we really might be getting close to that point. But I also can imagine this sense of pie. There's one pie. I have this piece of pie. If you have more pie, I'm going to lose some pie. It's like sort of community organizing 101, right? In terms of power brokering. I think it's going to be a battle. I mean, we already see the Karen, whatever. We see already there's a bunch of white folks that are, I won't get into politics, but just standing by their stuff no matter what. Like the Klan is out, the white supremacy, and they're just still holding it ground. But I can't help but think when in some of the language and policy talk in terms of defunding the police, which I think is for me personally, is a rough term, because I think it misses the point of what I think the policies are about. But anyway, that's my own. But I can't help but think that we're starting, that might become, I don't know, it feels like it might be real. When I say real, it might be actionable.
I think it's a matter of when, not if,
Yeah.
But the key is, I do think, even with Black Lives Matter, to me, and I've said this in the past, it's a distraction. But I'm not God, so I can't say, God, why you not letting the block by block get this attention? Because from the block by block perspective, it's about Blacks taking care of self. It's about Blacks block by block making sure the men are standing up for the ladies and the children. It's about Black people pooling their money together to be self-responsible. It's about Blacks holding anybody accountable that's in our neighborhood. Whereas I see Black Lives Matter as constantly looking externally at what the police doing to them, what white people are doing. There's a place for that, but first things first is the internal. So that's how I view the Black Lives Matter. And then I think there's a segment in the white narrative, the dominant narrative, that want to label everything Black Lives Matter. And it's like, I'm not Black Lives Matter. We're block by block. You know what I mean? So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. No, I love Sai. I'm so grateful you brought this up. I was having a conversation a couple weeks ago, and the
Mm-hmm.
problem is I didn't have enough information to really to is, you know, and, and what sounded like heresy. I said to her, I said, you know, not every African American, we're talking about Chicago, in Chicago, is behind Black Lives Matter. And that was heresy. And I didn't to, you know, like I said earlier, I am no expert. I said that to say, because again, going to dominant narrative, the dominant narrative is and I'm nothing against Black Lives Matter. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I think every individual truly has a lot to unlearn, especially different white folks have different things to unlearn, different Black folks have different things to unlearn. Like everybody, you know, there's not this monolithic, you know, Black experience. I don't think. I mean, I could be wrong, but tell me, like,
Well,
you know,
it's
or the
no
white
shoe fits all for
experience,
nothing in life. So nah, I don't think right.
you know, but and so sort of to that point, but I felt like I lost that argument. I tried to plant a seed because I didn't have enough, you know, facts. But I said truly, I said, don't think that Black Lives Matter represents all Black folks' views in Chicago.
Right.
But then I was sort of out
And they
talked, you
shouldn't,
know, and that
and I
happened.
think that's the, like that title, because I had to tell one of my Navy buddies, guy from the Netherlands, love him, we served together, and he said, "Sorry, but Black Lives Matter, this is what they stand for." And I said, if you notice, I never talk about National Block Club University. I talk about block by block, because I think organizations have a fault, and so I don't care about Black Lives Matter, the organization. Black Lives Matter is a good theme. It's a good theme to make sure that
Right.
the white people who don't care about Black lives know that they do matter. So I think the theme sounds good, but I don't care about who the president is, the vice president. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about how do we make sure first that Black Lives Matter. When you look in the mirror, Black people gotta know that
Mm.
Black Lives Matter. We can't be singing and rapping about being a savage, because that goes against lives mattering. Savage mean what? It's the total opposite. Destroy, kill, just brutalize. That's what savage is. And I think we as Black people definitely got to make sure that we cover home base first, internal, and then makes you a more whole person to deal with other groups. And I do think we got this race thing totally backwards. Uh, they, when you say white people, Black people, you got to really quantify that, because not all, right? So white people died, during the Civil War, letting Blacks stay in the houses. They risked everything. So what we got to concentrate on is ignorance. That's one thing. And then you got the
Mm.
hatred, real hatred, people who is in their heart. And then you got those who are like complicit, the wife who know their husband hate, and they just go along. So they got some responsibility in that as well. What's your thoughts on putting everyone in one category?
I know, I appreciate what you said. I agree that putting everyone in one category is easy, but it's wrong. It's, when
Crazy.
I say wrong, it's not like, if the math isn't accurate, like the science doesn't work. It's not
Right.
true. And I think, I mean, one of the things I think about in terms of complicating narratives, you know, like I said earlier, I really believe we are all learning. You shared this with me when we talked some months ago, that just learning happens in degrees. It's not a binary off on switch, you
Yep.
know, and you know, we are constantly learning and growing and changing. So I think that it is, you know, there's something, you know, about being an upstander. Like when you were talking about ignorance, hatred, or complicit, I really appreciate that way of framing humanity, because it seems to me that, pardon me, that no matter who we are, whatever our cultural identity is, whatever our role, like you asked me at the beginning, what's your family? Tell me more about your context. Each of us is walking around in a context constantly. Whoever we are, we all have work to do. Each of us has work to do, and each of us has different work to do based on where we are in life at that time.
Yep.
You know, and not just where we are geographically. That of course informs, but what meaning we're making, what we're choosing to question, what we're standing up for, or what we're flipping being quiet about.
Yeah.
You know, when I say being quiet, it's like, you know, as a white chick, you know, people in privilege learn all the time that their feelings and opinions matter. They are constantly reinforced that, you know, I constantly get reinforcement that my opinions matter. And that's ridiculous. Yes, my opinions matter, but they don't matter more than someone else's.
Exactly.
So that's why I'm saying the thing of be quiet.
Right.
Just listen.
But that's one of the things that,
it's like, so my point.
Yeah. Now, I was gonna say that's one of the things I love about you, because honestly, when you think about white people who are helping Black people, um, and I always go to Mr. Flager's scenario, it's important to understand the environment and what is historical. So historical is white is right, and white people got to always lead Black people and teach and guide them.
Right.
And what I love about you is, like you said, you coming in, listening and learning. You don't like. I was surprised you agreed to be on here. You don't want to be on the forefront. You don't need your ego stroke to say, "Look at me, I'm doing this, this, and this, and I'm not a racist." But that comes to something else, and that's why I say it's important. It comes to your upbringing. It comes to your value system. If you're insecure as a person, then you're looking to secure that what is insecure in you, and that might mean you go and do things or overcompensate.
No, it's true. No, overcompensating is real. And I think too, something else I think about, I learned from a woman years ago in a van in Detroit. I was on a van in Detroit in the airport. I was at some teaching conference, and I happened to be in the van ride with the woman, Yvonne Chan. I'll never forget her. She was a blue ribbon principal in LA. She was a star keynote speaker. And I just happened to have this 5 a.m. because, you know, I had an hour with her in a van, and she was brilliant. And I'll never forget one thing. She said so many brilliant things. And so she built a community around this school. I mean, there was a store, there was a restaurant being run by parents. I mean, she built infrastructure based on this school. And she had the teachers teaching at the college education classes were happening at the school. I mean, it was such a powerful model of a school as a community center for real.
Excellent.
Shops, hair salon, thrift store, like all this stuff. Anyhow, but one thing she said to me that was so deep, and I go back to me as a white woman in Chicago, one thing because I was asking her questions, I forget what I was asking her. And I was about to become a principal, but I didn't know it then. That was funny how God works. But she said one of the benefits she had was that she wasn't from LA, and that she was Asian, and that the majority of the school families were Black and Latino. And she said that there was great benefit to her being an outsider because she already wasn't playing by the rules that were expected.
Right.
That she came in with different assumptions. And she said sometimes it caused tension, but what it did is give the school, her as a leader, everybody kind of a new, there was sort of, what's that called?
A level
just like
playing field.
Yeah, 11 playoff, right. And so that's what I sort of think about too, in terms of being a white woman in Chicago. I wonder it would be different, I don't know, if I had grown up here. You know, like for example, I don't know if that's true, but I wonder if it would be different if I, you know, grew up in or I grew up in Evanston, or I don't know. I'm just
Now,
picking
and
a
that's what I was
neighborhood.
gonna say. Growing up in Chicago is really is two different worlds, right? So it depends. If you're up north, then you're into a diverse pool. Whereas if you grew up in Inglewood or you grew up in North Lawndale or Roseland, then
Yeah,
it would have been different, Lisa. so
yeah,
so we
and so anyhow, yeah.
yeah. So we got 5 minutes, and this time
Okay.
just flew by. It just totally flew by. What would you say are the takeaways that people should have, and from, let's say, what are the takeaways white people should have in Chicago doing work or wanting to do work in Chicago that may want to come into one of the black neighborhoods and do some work? How
Mm.
should they come in? What are three takeaways?
Well, first of all, you don't, I would say to white people, you don't know. That's my first thing. Like,
Mhm.
just the way I don't know. I mean, I don't know. What am I trying to say? White people have privilege and access and resources oftentimes. And that's not because you're better or you deserve it or you earn it. And to whom much is given, much is expected. So if you have access, your responsibility is not to come in as a superhero, because you're not. You're not a superhero, and you're not bad. You're not evil, but you're not a superhero. So get out of the way. Connect. Get out of the way. Learn. Um, and this isn't an intellectual enterprise. Being a human being is, we're in our flesh, we're in our spirit, we have emotions, we have the daily fabric of life.
Right.
So I think part of what I would say is listen, learn, and be in orbit. When I say be in orbit, I don't know, I have relationships. Exit, I don't know what I don't want to assume what someone's comfort zone is, but one of the best things, we do this daily cyber circle for Contextos, and one of the best things I've seen is on this call, some of our authors who are home on EM, electronic monitoring, have had extreme experiences in Roseland and Auburn Gresham specifically, are two young men I'm thinking of.
Mhm.
Exquisite authors, they're heart and soul, but they're on this call all the time. And then there's this beautiful woman, lovely woman, a white middle class woman, I guess, like me, I don't know, she's like in her 50s, my age. And but she's on the call all the time, and so each time we're reading and we're sharing stories with each other, this is the first time that she's ever had, I'm going to say intimacy, and I use that word, like right,
Right.
righteously, intimacy with a human being that spent 10 years behind walls.
Right.
This is the first time she's had a friend
Yeah.
on electronic monitoring. So all of a sudden, when she's reading these pieces and the stories about violence and what's happening at Auburn Gresham, this is real. Like, she now has a person. Like,
Yeah.
this is, and I hate to say it, this is controversial, but for a lot of white people, Black folks have to be humanized.
Yeah.
The notion, the concept, because if there's not relationship or actual fabric of life, it's this theoretical concept.
Yeah.
That media fills in the blanks.
Exactly.
So any way that we can get to know each other as human beings, just like, in the Reconstruction time, yes, we want to change policies. We need new rules and procedures. We
Right.
need investment in communities. We need resources. We need to stop the militarization of certain communities. I've gotten pulled, all of my moving violations in my life have been in North Lawndale. I drive the same way all over the city for 30 years. The reason that I get pulled over in North Lawndale, I'm not driving differently. I'm not driving a different car. There are more police there. So it's more likely that I'm going to have an interaction. Anyway, so we need to change all those things. But what we cannot skip over is we must, as human beings, continue to unlearn and learn. We must
So I got,
develop different mindsets.
you don't know. I love that. You're coming in, you don't know. So that means check yourself. So check
Stay
yourself, everyone.
humble.
Come in, open ears, and learn. So you gotta listen
Yes.
and then be the orbit, and that's those having those relationships and how you interact with each other.
Yeah.
Now, so my three, and this is what I always say, I consider you MDA. I don't know if you want to write that down.
What
MDA.
is that? I know. What is that?
MDA are modern day abolitionists.
Ah, bless you. Wow, that's an honor. Wow,
And,
MDA.
and so we know back in the day we had abolitionists, people who were pushing for the freedom, and your track record of what you've done in black community without no fanfare and attention qualifies you. This is what I say are three attributes that's critical for white people who are about to be MDAs or want to be MDAs. The first one is to put money into black businesses.
Mm,
and,
okay,
and, and we know a big part of slavery was about economics. And so
right,
to get some economics into the business sector, not the non-for-profit sector primary,
right.
because the business sector are creating jobs and will take risks with guys who've been recently released. So to me, when NECA, Hanover Park, if they just flood the black businesses of Chicago with buying everything, buying in advance, 6 months in advance, pour money in, that way the black businesses can onboard
Yeah.
brothers who wouldn't have jobs. So that's first thing is about the money.
Okay.
The second thing is for them to make certain that they have conversations in their orbit, meaning family and friends. So,
Okay.
and that goes to what you said, which is the orbit. So I took that from you,
Yeah.
but you gotta have that conversation. Then the third thing is to make certain that you never lead uh, and damage the children's view that black people can't lead. So that's where you be real mindful that even if you are sponsoring something, even if you are the head, don't sit there and have all these black people under you saying, look at what I'm doing, and psychologically damaging. So I think that's the main, that the last one is the protect the visual imagery of inferiority, and making sure
Mm.
that you're not further perpetuating that view that they can't do nothing. And gardening is a key example. I went to a conference and you had all these white people telling all these black people about gardening. And I was looking, and the blacks was like, we know that already, but they secured the funding. It's their event, it's their conference. So the black people just had to sit there marginalized. And that's part of what I was saying. So we at the end
No,
there,
thank you.
Lisa. This went by too quick. I mean, just
I
think.
know. I love this. Well, I thank you for this opportunity, and you have, as always, I always learn with you. I always have. I love that. Let me repeat this. Put money into black businesses. Have conversations in your own orbits with all the people, family, friends, the ears you have. That's so true. And then number three, mind the visuals. Never, never let a child, for example, learn. Never let a child see that is not for that white people are always leading stuff. Let children see and let it be real, right? It's not just the optics, but pay attention to what we are seeding in the mind and heart and soul of a young child with the optics. Is that what you're saying?
Because when I'm secure with me, I could be in the background. If
Yeah.
Mariah is doing well, I don't have to be up there next to Mariah. Look, y'all, I'm doing well with my daughter. I did my part. I'm back
Right.
here, out of the limelight, but she's up there because of things that I did to help her get there. So if you're secure that you're an ally, you help black people get to a certain place, you ain't got to be up there. Look at me. Hey,
Right.
I did
For
this.
sure. No, I'm with okay.
So
Oh,
yeah, that's it.
Saran, bless you.
Well,
Thank
let's do
you.
this. I'm gonna invite you back again. I want people to know that you put your money where your mouth is. You've been a supporter of us
Oh,
since
thank
day
you.
one. Spiritually, we talk on the phone, catching up. You have links out here in Georgia, so we looking forward when this COVID comes away. We
Yeah.
come and see you out there in Georgia too. And I just thank you
Yes.
for what you do every day, Lisa.
Bless you. Thank you for being you, and thank you for encouraging me and feeding me and helping me learn and grow. I promise you, I am honored and grateful. I mean,
All right, and Mimi says, "See you later."
all right, Mimi, love you. Give Mariah my love. See you
I
soon.
will.
God bless.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye. Thank